Have you ever seen a billion-dollar empire crumble because of one bad attitude in the high-stakes world of corporate aviation? Respect isn't just a courtesy, it's currency. When the senior crew of Regal Atlantic Flight 402 decided to humiliate a quiet man in a bespoke suit, forcing him out of the seat he paid for, they thought they were just flexing their power. They didn't know they were signing their own termination papers. They didn't know that the man they dragged to row 44 wasn't just a passenger. He was the one man who held the airline's financial fate in his pocket. This is the story of how a $20 power trip turned into a $500 million nightmare in less than 5 minutes. The humidity in Miami was suffocating, a stark contrast to the glacial air conditioning inside Terminal D of Miami International Airport. Damien Cross adjusted the cuffs of his navy Tom Ford suit, checking the time on his Patek Philippe. It was 4:15 p.m. Boarding for Regal Atlantic Flight 880 to London. Heathrow was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. Damien was a man who moved through the world with the specific kind of silence that only extreme wealth affords. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. At 42, he was the founder and CEO of Helix Global, a logistics and infrastructure titan that quietly moved half the world's microchips. He was tired. He had just spent 3 weeks negotiating a merger in Sao Paulo, and all he wanted was the lie-flat quiet of seat 1A, a glass of bourbon, and 12 hours of sleep. He approached the gate, his black leather weekender bag in hand. The gate area was a chaotic sea of tourists in flip-flops and exhausted families. But Damien bypassed the fray, heading toward the lane marked First Class/Diamond Medallion. Standing behind the podium was Brenda Miller. Brenda had been a gate agent for Regal Atlantic for 20 years, and in that time she had calcified. She wore her uniform not as service attire, but as armor. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it pulled at the corners of her eyes, giving her a permanent look of skepticism. She was chatting with a younger colleague, Kyle, ignoring the line forming in front of her. Damien waited patiently for a moment, then cleared his throat softly. "Good afternoon." Brenda didn't look up immediately. She finished her sentence about her husband's transmission repair bill before slowly turning her gaze toward Damien. Her eyes did a quick, practiced scan. Black man, mid-40s. No entourage. She missed the watch. She missed the quality of the wool in the suit. She only saw what she expected to see. "Boarding hasn't started yet," she said, her voice flat and nasal. "We need everyone to step back." "I understand," Damien said, his voice a deep, calm baritone. "I just wanted to verify my seat assignment. The app was showing a glitch earlier." Brenda sighed, a heavy, theatrical exhale that fluttered the scarf around her neck. "Sir, this lane is for first class and Diamond members only. Economy boarding is in Zone 4 and 5. That line is over there by the window." She pointed a manicured finger toward a mass of people near the restrooms. Damien didn't move. He didn't get angry. He simply held out his boarding pass. "I'm in 1A, first class." Brenda snatched the pass from his hand with aggressive speed. She squinted at it, typing something into a terminal with violent keystrokes. She frowned. The screen showed Damien Cross, 1A, full fare, paid. It annoyed her. It annoyed her that this man, who looked like he should be grateful just to be on the flight, held the most expensive ticket on the manifest. It annoyed her that he was calm. Today had been a bad day for Brenda. Her supervisor had reprimanded her for tardiness, and she was looking for a place to put her frustration. "Stand to the side," she commanded, handing the ticket back without looking at him. I need to verify the manifest before I can clear you. There's an inconsistency. An inconsistency? Damien asked, raising an eyebrow. I bought this ticket 3 weeks ago. Just stand to the side, sir, she snapped, raising her voice enough that heads in the nearby seats turned. Unless you want me to call security for disrupting the pre-boarding process. Damien looked at her. He saw the pettiness in her eyes, the desperate need for control. He had negotiated with warlords and hostile boardrooms. A gate agent named Brenda was a gnat. He stepped to the side, leaning against the glass, and watched. He watched as a tall, older white man in a linen suit approached the desk a moment later. Afternoon. Brenda, the man said, flashing a smile. Oh, hello, Mr. Garrison. Brenda's face transformed instantly. The scowl melted into a sycophantic beam. Heading back to London. We have you in 1F. Let me just scan you right in. You don't need to wait. Damien watched as Mr. Garrison was ushered through. He watched as a young couple in hoodies, children of some celebrity, presumably were waved through the first-class lane. 10 minutes passed. The now boarding first-class announcement played. Damien stepped forward again. Mrs. Miller, Damien said. You've boarded the rest of the cabin. Is the inconsistency resolved? Brenda looked at him, a flicker of malicious delight in her eyes. She picked up the phone on her desk, dialed a short code, and whispered something. She hung up and smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Actually, Mr. Cross, there is a problem. I'm going to need you to wait until the captain clears the final weight and balance. Step back. Damien checked his phone. He had a notification from his assistant board meeting, scheduled for 9 a.m. London time. The acquisition contracts are ready for your signature. He couldn't miss this flight. And Brenda knew it. The plane was a Boeing 777, a massive bird capable of crossing oceans with ease. Inside the first-class cabin, the air smelled of expensive leather and warm lavender towels. Champagne corks were already popping. Captain Frederick Golson sat in the cockpit, reviewing the pre-flight checklist. He was a man who prided himself on running a tight ship, though his definition of tight often meant convenient for Frederick. He was 55, with silver hair and a complexion that hinted at high blood pressure and too many layover steakhouses. The interphone buzzed. It was Brenda from the gate. Fred, we have a situation, Brenda said. I've got a passenger here. Cross. 1A. He's being difficult, aggressive. I don't feel comfortable with him in the front cabin near the cockpit door. You know the policy. There was no policy that stated this, specifically, but Brenda knew the magic words: aggressive, security risk, uncomfortable. Captain Golson didn't ask for details. He didn't ask what the man had done. He trusted Brenda, mostly because Brenda brought him extra coffee and flattered his ego. Bump him, Golson said carelessly, flipping a switch on the overhead panel. If he's a problem, kick him off. If he's just annoying, put him in the back. I don't want drama up here today. I've got a headache. He paid full fare. Fred, Brenda added, covering her bases. Full first. I don't care if he bought the plane. Golson grunted. Captain's discretion. Safety of the crew. Move him to economy. If he complains, tell him he can take the next flight tomorrow. Copy that. Captain. Back at the gate. The boarding was nearly complete. The economy passengers were shuffling past Damien, some eyeing him curiously. He stood alone in his impeccable suit, an island of calm in a stream of chaos. Brenda beckoned him over. She was flanked now by a large man from airport security. Not police, just a contracted guard she had waved over to intimidate him. "Good news, Mr. Cross," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We can get you on the flight." "Excellent," Damien said, reaching for his pass. "However," Brenda continued, pulling the pass away, "due to a last-minute equipment swap and security protocols regarding crew comfort, we've had to reassign your seat." She printed a new boarding pass. The paper was flimsy, unlike the thick cardstock of first class. She slapped it on the counter. SEAT, 44E. Damien stared at it. 44E. That is a middle seat, in the last row. It's the only seat left. Brenda shrugged. "Take it or leave it." "I paid $12,000 for seat 1A, Damien said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. "You are moving me to a middle seat in economy without a refund, without a valid explanation, while my original seat is currently empty." "It's not empty," Brenda lied smoothly. "It's been assigned to a federal air marshal." That was the lie that usually shut people up. Who argues with national security? Damien looked at her. He looked at the security guard who was resting his hand on his belt, waiting for Damien to act out. Damien knew exactly what was happening. He had grown up in Chicago. He knew what it looked like when someone decided you didn't belong. He also knew that if he raised his voice, if he showed even a sliver of the anger boiling in his gut, the narrative would shift. He would become the angry black male. He would be arrested. He would miss the meeting in London. The merger would fail. Thousands of jobs would be at risk. He had to play the long game. "I see," Damien said. He took the flimsy slip of paper. "Is there any way to get my luggage? It has sensitive documents." "Your bag is already in the hold," Brenda said, dismissing him with a wave. "It will meet you in London. Board now, or the doors close." Damien walked down the jet bridge. He walked past the flight attendant at the door, a woman named Nancy who looked at his suit, then at his ticket, and frowned in confusion. "44A, sir. Are you sure you look like—" "There was a change of plans," Damien said tightly. He walked through the first-class cabin. He saw seat 1A. It wasn't occupied by a federal air marshal. Sitting in seat 1A, drinking a glass of champagne and laughing loudly at a joke on his phone, was a man in a pilot's uniform. A dead-heading pilot, an employee flying off duty to get to another airport. He was friends with Captain Golson. They had needed a seat for their buddy, Rick, so he could get to London for a golf weekend. Brenda and Golson had bumped a paying, high-value customer to the back of the bus to give a free luxury seat to their friend. Damien paused for a fraction of a second. He made eye contact with Rick, who toasted him with the champagne flute, unaware of whose seat he was warming. Damien memorized Rick's face. He memorized the name tag on the senior purser. He kept walking, past the lie-flat beds of business class, past the extra legroom of premium economy, into the dense, humid pack of main cabin. He reached row 44. It was right against the rear lavatories. The smell of chemical disinfectant was strong. Seat 44E was a middle seat, sandwiched between two large backpackers who had already claimed the armrests. "Excuse me," Damien said politely. The man in the aisle seat groaned, rolling his eyes as he stood up to let Damien in. "You're late, buddy. We were about to push back." Damien sat down, his knees pressed firmly into the plastic seat back in front of him. He couldn't open his laptop. He couldn't work. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Golson's voice boomed over the PA. confident and smooth. "Welcome aboard Flight 880 to London. We're looking at a smooth ride. Flight time of 8 hours and 30 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the award-winning service of Regal Atlantic." The plane pushed back. The engines roared to life. Damien Cross reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He had about 5 minutes before they reached cruising altitude, and the Wi-Fi kicked in. He wasn't going to sleep. He wasn't going to watch a movie. He opened his contacts. He scrolled past Senator Wilson. He scrolled past Governor Davidson. He stopped at a contact labeled Alistair Sterling, chairman of the board, Regal Atlantic Holdings. Damien didn't just know the chairman. Damien's company, Helix Global, was currently the largest contract holder for Regal Atlantic's cargo division. Helix Global shipped $500 million worth of freight with Regal Atlantic annually, and the contract was up for renewal in 48 hours. As the wheels lifted off the tarmac, Damien Cross smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. The award-winning service was about to cost them everything. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged off. The cabin erupted in the noise of tray tables unlatching and babies crying. In 44E, Damien Cross was motionless. He paid the $29.99 for the high-speed Wi-Fi. It was slow to connect, the spinning wheel on his screen mocking him. Connected. He didn't text Alistair Sterling immediately. Damien was a strategist. You don't fire a cannon until you've aimed it. First, he logged into the Helix Global Secure server. He pulled up the pending contract renewal for Regal Atlantic Cargo. It was a massive document, representing 40% of Regal Atlantic's quarterly projected revenue. The airline was struggling. They needed this cash injection to reassure their shareholders at the upcoming earnings call. Damien opened the Clause 14B Termination Rights section. Helix Global reserves the right to terminate negotiations or void existing agreements immediately upon evidence of gross negligence, reputational risk, or violation of Helix Global's supplier code of conduct, specifically regarding discrimination and ethical treatment. Perfect. He opened his email. He drafted a message to Alistair Sterling, Chairman, Board of Directors, Regal Atlantic, CC, Sarah Jenkins, Chief Legal Officer, Helix Global, Press Relations Bloomberg, WSJ, subject immediate termination of partnership and acquisition, offer withdrawal. Dear Alistair, I am currently writing to you from Seat 44E on Regal Atlantic Flight 880. Despite holding a full fare ticket for Seat 1A, I was forcibly demoted to the last row of economy by your gate agent, Ms. Miller, and your captain, Mr. Golson. The reason given was security, though I observed my seat was subsequently given to an off-duty pilot friend of the crew. As you know, Helix Global values respect and integrity above all else. We cannot entrust $500 million of our logistics to a company whose leadership culture from the gate to the cockpit condones racial profiling and theft of service. Effective immediately. Helix Global is suspending all cargo contracts with Regal Atlantic. Furthermore, we are withdrawing our bid to acquire your European logistics subsidiary. I will be landing in London in 8 hours. I expect a formal response by then. If not, my next call is to the Federal Aviation Administration to file a formal discrimination complaint. Regards. Damien Cross, CEO. Helix Global. He hit send. The timestamp was 5:12 p.m. Damien put his phone down on his lap. He looked at the backpacker next to him, who was eating a pungent tuna sandwich. Want a bite? The guy asked, crumbs falling onto Damien's pristine suit trousers. No, thank you, Damien said softly. I've already eaten. 5 minutes past. In the corporate headquarters of Regal Atlantic in New York, a notification pinged on Alistair Sterling's iPad. He was in the middle of a dinner with investors. He glanced at the screen. His face went pale. He choked on his water. "Alistair, are you all right?" one of the investors asked. Alistair stood up, knocking his chair over. I have to make a call. Now." Back on the plane, the atmosphere was calm. The flight attendants were rolling the beverage cart down the aisle. Suddenly, the phone in the galley at the front of the plane, the one connected to the cockpit and the ground via satellite, began to ring. It wasn't a normal ring. It was the emergency chime, the distinctive ding-dong-ding that meant pick up. Now, in the cockpit, Captain Golson was sipping his coffee, chatting with his first officer about his golf handicap. "Ground is calling," the first officer said, looking confused. On the emergency line, Golson frowned. What now? Probably weather. He picked up the handset. "Flight 880, Captain Golson." The voice on the other end was not dispatch. It was the Vice President of Flight Operations. And he was screaming. "Golson! What the hell is going on up there?" "Excuse me," Golson stammered. "Who is in seat 1? Hey, Golson froze. He looked back through the cockpit door peephole. He could see Rick sleeping comfortably. A passenger." "Why? Don't lie to me." "Fred, we have the manifest. Who did you bump to put Rick in that seat?" "We had a security concern with a passenger, a Mr. Cross." "Security concern?" The VP's voice cracked. "You idiot. That security concern is Damien Cross. He's the CEO of Helix. He just pulled a $500 million contract because you put him in the toilet row." Golson's stomach dropped. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. "Fix it," the VP hissed. "I don't care how you do it. You fix it right now. You get him out of that seat. You kiss his ring. You give him the plane if he wants it. If he lands in London and that email stands, you won't just be fired. Fred, you'll be sued into oblivion. Do you hear me? Yes, sir." The line went dead. Golson stared at the instrument panel. The numbers seemed to be swimming. "Problem? Skip?" the first officer asked. Golson unbuckled his seatbelt. His hands were shaking. "Take the controls. I have to go back." "Back where?" "To economy." Captain Frederick Golson adjusted his hat, but he couldn't adjust the sickening feeling in his gut. He stepped out of the cockpit, the heavy, reinforced door clicking shut behind him. The first-class cabin was serene. The lights were dimmed to a soft, warm amber. His friend, Rick, the deadheading pilot, was snoring lightly in seat 1A. A half-empty glass of Dom Perignon balanced precariously on the armrest. He looked comfortable. He looked entitled. For the first time in 20 years, Golson didn't see a colleague. He'd seen a liability. Golson walked past the galley. Nancy, the lead flight attendant, looked up from her magazine. She saw the color of the captain's face, a mixture of ash-gray and blotchy red, and immediately stood up. "Captain, is everything okay? Is it the engines?" "Wake him up," Golson whispered, pointing a shaking finger at Rick. "Rick." But he just fell asleep. "Wake him up," Golson hissed, loud enough that a woman in 2F stirred. "Get him out of that seat. Now. Put him in the jump seat. Put him in the lavatory. I don't care. Just clear seat 1A. Change the linen. Put a fresh bottle of champagne there. Do it in 2 minutes." Nancy stared at him, bewildered, but she saw the terror in his eyes. She moved instantly, shaking Rick awake. "Was it, are we there?" Rick mumbled. wiping drool from his chin. "Get up. Rick, you have to move," Nancy whispered urgently. Golson didn't wait to watch the argument. He had a longer walk to make. He walked through the curtain into business class, then through premium economy. The air got warmer as he moved back. The smell changed from lavender and coffee to body heat and stale sandwiches. He reached the main cabin. It was a sea of humanity. People were watching movies, sleeping, reading. As the captain in his full uniform with 4 gold stripes on his epaulets walked down the narrow aisle, heads turned. It was rare to see the pilot in command walking back to the cheap seats during a flight, unless something was wrong. Whispers rippled through the cabin like a wave. Is something broken? Is there a bomb? Why is he sweating like that? Golson felt every set of eyes on him. The aisle felt miles long. He had to squeeze past a beverage cart, muttering apologies to the junior flight attendants who looked at him with wide eyes. Finally, he reached row 44. The back of the plane was louder. The engine noise was a constant roar here. The air was stagnant. And there, wedged into the middle seat, knees pressed against his chest, suit jacket folded neatly on his lap to prevent it from wrinkling, was Damien Cross. Damien was typing on his phone. He didn't look up, even though he knew Golson was there. He could smell the fear. Mr. Cross, Golson said. His voice, usually so commanding over the PA system, came out as a squeak. Damien finished typing a sentence. He hit send. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned his head. His expression was one of polite curiosity, the way one might look at a confused child. "Yes, Captain. Mr. Cross. There has been a terrible misunderstanding," Golson stammered. He leaned in, trying to keep his voice down so the surrounding passengers wouldn't hear, but the backpackers on either side of Damien leaned in, eager for the drama. "We've realized that there was a glitch in the system." "A glitch?" Damien repeated. "The gate agent, Ms. Miller, told me it was a security protocol. Then she told me it was a weight and balance issue. Now it's a glitch." "Yes. Well, mistakes were made," Golson said, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "But we've rectified it. Your seat, 1A, is available. I'd like to personally escort you back to the first-class cabin. We have a hot meal waiting for you, and I've instructed the crew to bring you our finest vintage wine." The backpacker in the aisle seat looked at Damien. "Dude, take it. First class go." Golson smiled nervously, reaching a hand out to help Damien up. "Here, let me take your bag, sir, please. My apologies for the inconvenience." The entire back section of the plane was watching now. A few people had paused their movies. A teenager in row 42 held up his phone. "Recording." Damien looked at the captain's outstretched hand. He looked at the frantic desperation in Golson's eyes. He knew exactly what was happening. Someone in New York had called the cockpit. They were trying to put the genie back in the bottle. Damien smiled. It was a cold, dazzling smile. "No, thank you, Captain," Damien said clearly. Golson froze. I beg your pardon." "I said no, thank you," Damien said, his voice carrying easily over the engine hum. "I am quite comfortable here. I wouldn't want to disrupt the security protocols you established. After all, if I was a risk at the gate. Surely I'm still a risk now." "Mr. Cross, please," Golson pleaded, dropping his voice to a desperate whisper. "You don't understand. I have orders. I need you to move." "You have orders?" Damien raised an eyebrow. From whom Alistair Sterling. At the mention of the chairman's name, Golson flinched as if slapped. I paid for this flight to get to London. Captain, Damien continued, his voice hardening, I am currently in the seat you assigned me. I am following your rules. Now, unless you are going to land this plane immediately, I suggest you return to the cockpit and fly. You are blocking the aisle. Mr. Cross, I am begging you, Golson said, his dignity completely gone. My job, my pension. Your job was to ensure the safety and fair treatment of your passengers, Damien said. You failed. Now, you're just a man standing in economy class. Goodbye, Captain. Damien put his headphones back on and closed his eyes. Golson stood there for a full minute, paralyzed. He looked around. The passengers were snickering. The phone camera was still pointed at him. He had no power here. He couldn't drag the man to first class. Defeated, humiliated, and knowing his career was over, Captain Golson turned around and began the long, shameful walk back to the front of the plane. The remaining 7 hours of Flight 880 were a study in psychological warfare. Word spread through the plane like wildfire. The teenager who had filmed the interaction posted it to TikTok immediately. Using the in-flight Wi-Fi. Caption, Captain begs guy in economy to move to first class and gets rejected. Hashtag Regal Atlantic. Hashtag fail. Hashtag karma within an hour. The video had 10,000 views. By hour 3, it had 1 million. In first class, the atmosphere was funereal. Rick, the deadheading pilot, was now sitting on a jump seat in the galley, looking miserable. Seat 1A remained empty, a haunting reminder of the mistake. The champagne went flat in the glass. In economy, Damien Cross was the king of row 44. The flight attendants, terrified of further angering him, tried to overcompensate. They brought him items from first class. Mr. Cross, a trembling flight attendant named Sarah said, presenting a porcelain plate with a filet mignon. The captain thought you might prefer this to the pasta option. Damien looked at the steak, then at his tray table, which was too small to even hold the large plate. No, thank you, Sarah, Damien said kindly. He didn't blame the junior crew. I'll have the pretzels. Ah, are you sure? I'm sure. And please, give this meal to the gentleman next to me. He mentioned he was hungry. The backpacker's eyes popped out of his head as he was served a $50 steak. Dude, you are a legend, he whispered to Damien. Meanwhile, on the ground, the situation was spiraling out of control. The email Damien had sent to the board of directors had triggered a panic sale. Rumors hit Wall Street that Helix Global Regal Atlantic's biggest partner was pulling out. CNBC breaking news. Regal Atlantic, RGA shares tumbled 12% in after-hours trading amid rumors of contract dispute with logistics giant Helix Global. Alistair Sterling, the chairman, was in a war room in New York, screaming into a conference phone. Get me Golson. Why isn't Cross in first class yet? We can't reach him, sir, an aide replied. The captain says, Mr. Cross refuses to move. He's staging a sit-in, in 44E. He's doing this on purpose, Alistair said, sinking into his chair. He's letting us bleed. He's letting the stock tank for every hour he sits in that middle seat. It was true. Damien knew that the optics of a black CEO being forced to the back of the bus and then dignifying the insult with quiet resistance was a PR nuclear bomb. He didn't need to shout. He just needed to exist in that space. Every hour the plane was in the air, Regal Atlantic lost roughly $70 million in market capitalization. By the time the plane began its descent into London, the loss had capped at nearly $500 million in projected value and contract cancellations. The landing was smooth, but Captain Golson's hands were shaking so badly he had to let the first officer handle the final approach. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London Heathrow." The intercom crackled. "Local time is 6 o'clock a.m. Usually. The captain stands at the cockpit door to say goodbye to passengers. Today, the cockpit door remained firmly locked. Golson was hiding. The jet bridge connected. The first-class passengers deplaned first, oblivious to the financial apocalypse that had occurred while they slept. When the economy passengers began to file out, they didn't push. They let Damien Cross go first. It was a silent mark of respect. Damien walked up the aisle. He picked up his weekender bag from the overhead bin in row 44. His suit was slightly wrinkled now. His neck was stiff, but his stride was unbroken. He walked past the empty seat 1A. He walked past the terrified flight attendants. He stepped off the plane and into the jet bridge. Waiting at the end of the jet bridge, right before the terminal, was a reception committee. But it wasn't the usual chauffeurs. It was Sir Richard Halloway, the European director of Regal Atlantic, flanked by 2 corporate lawyers and a PR crisis management team. They looked like they hadn't slept. "Mr. Cross," Halloway exclaimed, rushing forward with a desperate smile. "Mr. Cross, I am Richard Halloway. On behalf of Regal Atlantic, I want to offer my most profound, sincere apologies for the failures of our staff today." Damien didn't stop walking. Halloway had to trot to keep up with him. "We have a limousine waiting for you on the tarmac, sir," Halloway continued breathlessly. "We have a suite arranged at the Savoy. We want to discuss the contract. Please, Alistair Sterling is on the phone right now. He wants to speak with you personally." Damien stopped. He turned to face the frantic executive. The terminal was bustling with morning commuters. Damien spoke calmly, but loud enough for the nearby staff to hear. "Mr. Halloway, you have my luggage." Yes, right here." An assistant scurried forward with Damien's checked bag, which had been pulled from the hold with priority speed. "Good," Damien said, taking the handle. "Then I have no further business with you." "But the contract, the merger," Halloway pleaded. "Mr. Cross, this was one mistake by a rogue employee. You can't dismantle a 10-year partnership over a seat assignment." Damien leaned in close. His eyes were cold steel. "It wasn't a seat assignment, Richard. It was a statement. You told me exactly what you think I'm worth. You told me that my money, my status, and my loyalty meant nothing compared to the comfort of your captain's friend." He checked his watch. "My team has already signed a new logistics agreement with British Airways Cargo. They were very happy to take your business. I believe their stock is up 4% this morning." Halloway looked like he was going to vomit. "Have a good day," Damien said. He walked past them, through the customs gates, and out into the London morning. The descent of Regal Atlantic didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened on 4K screens across the globe. It started with a slow trickle of notifications on the phones of the airline's PR team in New York. The TikTok video posted by the teenager in row 42, titled "Captain Begs Economy." Passenger after stealing his seat had hit the algorithm's sweet spot. At 7 a.m. New York time, the video had 50,000 views. By 9 a.m., when the markets opened, it had 4.2 million inside the glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of the Regal Atlantic headquarters. The mood was not just panic, it was the heavy, suffocating silence of a funeral. Alistair Sterling, the chairman, stood at the head of the table. He was a man who usually projected the image of a silver-haired lion, but today he looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. On the massive monitors on the wall, CNN was playing on mute. The Chiron read, Airline CAO. Demoted discrimination accusations tank stock. Tell me, Alistair said, his voice barely a whisper, that we have a statement. The VP of Communications, a woman named Jessica, cleared her throat nervously. We drafted a statement, sir. We're calling it a misunderstanding regarding seat inventory management. Alistair slammed his hand on the mahogany table so hard his coffee cup rattled. Inventory management, Jessica. The man is Damien Cross. He isn't a misplaced Samsonite bag. He's the COO of the company that keeps our cargo division alive. You cannot spin this as a clerical error when the whole world can see our captain begging him in the aisle. Sir, the chief financial officer interrupted, looking up from his laptop with a face the color of ash. Helix Global just issued a press release. Read it, Alistair commanded, dread pooling in his stomach. It says, Helix Global refuses to partner with organizations that demonstrate a systemic failure of integrity. Effective immediately, we are invoking the morality clause to void all current contracts with Regal Atlantic. Furthermore, we are advising our partners in the microchip sector to review their logistics supply chains. The room went dead silent. The microchip sector, the CFO whispered, taking off his glasses. That's 60% of our premium freight. If Intel and Nvidia follow Helix, we're insolvent by Q3. Alistair turned to the window, looking out over the city. Get me the airport, get me the station manager in Miami, and get me the pilots' union rep. I want heads on pikes. I want them rolling down the tarmac before lunch. In Miami, the sun was shining brightly, casting long shadows across Terminal D. Brenda Miller arrived for her shift at 2 p.m., blissfully unaware of the magnitude of the storm. She hadn't checked the news. She had spent the morning gardening. She walked up to the secure employee entrance, humming a tune. She swiped her badge at the turnstile. Beep, beep, beep. A red light flashed. Access denied. Brenda frowned. She wiped the card on her skirt and tried again. Beep, beep, beep. Access denied. Stupid machine, she muttered. She walked over to the security guard station. Hey, Mike, the reader is acting up again. Can you buzz me in? Mike, a guard she had known for 5 years, didn't smile. He didn't look at her. He looked down at his clipboard. I can't do that. Brenda. What do you mean you can't? I'm late for the Heathrow push. You need to go to the administrative office, Mike said, finally meeting her eyes. There was no pity in them, only a strange sort of distance. Mr. Henderson is waiting for you. Brenda felt a cold prickle of unease on the back of her neck. She walked the long hallway to the admin offices, her heels clicking loudly on the linoleum. When she opened the door, it wasn't just her station manager. Mr. Henderson, waiting. It was the regional director and a woman from HR she had never seen before. Sit down. Brenda. Mr. Henderson said. He didn't offer her coffee. Is this about the Cross guy? Brenda asked, trying to summon her usual defiance. Because honestly, he was being aggressive. I followed protocol. I don't see why. The HR woman slid a tablet across the desk. It was playing the security footage from the gate. It showed Damien Cross standing calmly, hands at his sides, while Brenda pointed a finger in his face. It showed her laughing with Captain Golson. It showed her ushering the white passengers through while blocking Damien. "We have reviewed the audio logs from your station," the HR woman said, her voice like ice water. "You referred to a diamond medallion customer as a security risk, with zero evidence. You falsified a weight and balance issue, and we have a witness statement from the deadheading pilot, Rick, who confirmed you told him. Quote, 'Let's put the fancy guy in the back.'" Brenda's mouth went dry. "Rick said that, but we were just joking. Discrimination isn't a joke. Ms. Miller," the regional director said, "Regal Atlantic has lost $400 million in market value since yesterday. Do you understand that number? 400 million. I've been here 20 years, Brenda stammered, tears welling up, not from remorse, but from fear. "You can't fire me. The union won't allow it. The union has already reviewed the footage." "Mr. Henderson said quietly, "They aren't contesting this. This is gross misconduct. Brenda, it's immediate termination." "But my pension," Brenda whispered. She was 3 years away from full retirement. "Forfeited under the misconduct clause," the HR woman said. Standing up, "Please hand over your badge and your uniform scarf. Now. Brenda reached up with trembling hands and unknotted the silk scarf from her neck, the symbol of her authority for 2 decades. She placed it on the desk. She handed over her ID. "Security will escort you to the curb." "Mr. Henderson said, turning his back on her. The walk through the terminal was the longest of Brenda's life. She was in her civilian clothes, carrying a cardboard box with a potted plant and a stapler. She had to walk past the check-in counters. Her former colleagues, people she had gossiped with for years, suddenly found their computer screens incredibly interesting. No one looked at her. No one said goodbye. She was a ghost before she even exited the automatic doors. If Brenda's firing was a quiet execution, Captain Frederick Golson's was a public spectacle. Golson wasn't just fired, he was summoned to a formal tribunal at the Flight Operations Headquarters in Dallas. He walked into the hearing room, wearing his full uniform, trying to project the authority of a 4-stripe captain. But the room was filled with men who had flown more miles than him. The chief pilot sat at the center. "Captain Golson," the chief pilot began, "we have reviewed the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. Sir, I was making a command decision based on crew comfort." Golson lied, though his voice shook. "The passenger was hostile. We have the audio. Fred," the chief pilot cut him off. He pressed a button. Golson's own voice filled the room, tinny and arrogant. "I don't care if he bought the plane. Captain's discretion. Move him to economy. I've got a headache." The recording continued. "It's not empty. It's been assigned to a federal air marshal." The chief pilot stopped the tape. The silence in the room was deafening. "You lied to a passenger," the chief pilot said, his voice heavy with disgust. "You lied to your crew. You prioritized a non-revenue buddy pass over a full-fare CEO. And when you were caught, you tried to bribe the passenger with wine instead of owning your mistake." "I was under stress," Golson pleaded. "It was a momentary lapse." "It was a character failure," the chief pilot corrected. "Regal Atlantic is terminating your employment effective immediately. Furthermore, we are filing a report with the FAA regarding your fitness to hold an ATP certificate due to impulsive decision-making and falsification of flight manifests." Golson felt the blood drain from his face. You're going after my license. You cost this airline its reputation. Fred, you're lucky we aren't suing you for damages." Golson walked out of the building, stripped of his career. He was 55 years old. He had no other skills. His wife had already left to stay with her sister to avoid the news reporters camped on their lawn. He went to the parking lot, sat in his leased Mercedes, which he would soon have to return, and put his head on the steering wheel. He cried. Not for Damien Cross, but for himself. Rick, the pilot who had taken the seat, got off lightly by comparison. He was suspended for 6 months and demoted to first officer on domestic routes. He would spend the next 10 years flying short hops to Cleveland and Detroit, earning half his previous salary, known forever in the break rooms as the guy who stole the seat. 6 months later. The bleeding hadn't stopped. Regal Atlantic had tried to recover, but the brand was toxic. High-value business travelers had defected to Delta and British Airways. The loss of the Helix global cargo contract had created a cash flow crisis that couldn't be fixed with loans. The board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss liquidating assets, specifically the prized European Logistics Division, the network of planes, hangars, and landing slots that controlled freight into London, Paris, and Frankfurt. "We have a bidder," Alistair Sterling told the board, looking defeated. "It's an aggressive offer, lowball, but we don't have a choice. We need the cash to make payroll next month." "Who is the buyer?" a board member asked. Alistair hesitated. He looked at the paperwork in front of him. He swallowed hard. "Helix Global." A murmur went through the room. "You can't be serious," the board member said. "Damien Cross. He's buying the very division he crippled." "He's not just buying it," Alistair said, rubbing his temples. "He's rebranding it. He's taking our planes, our slots, and our routes. And because our stock is in the toilet, he's getting it for 40 cents on the dollar." It was the ultimate corporate checkmate. Damien Cross hadn't just taken his business elsewhere. He had waited for the airline to collapse, then swooped in to buy the pieces he wanted at a discount. He had effectively financed his own expansion using Regal Atlantic's incompetence. The vote passed unanimously. There was no other choice. 1 year to the day after the incident, Damien Cross stepped out of a Blacktown car at Miami International Airport. The humidity was the same. The noise was the same. But everything else had changed. He walked into the terminal. He was wearing a grey Tom Ford suit this time, even sharper than the last. He approached the first-class check-in counter for Regal Atlantic. The branding had changed slightly. There were posters up everywhere about a new era of service. A young woman stood behind the counter. Her name tag read Maya. She looked up and smiled a genuine, warm smile. "Good morning, sir. Checking in." "Damien Cross," he said, "flying to London." Maya's eyes widened slightly. Everyone in the airline industry knew the name. She typed quickly, her posture straightening instinctively. "Mr. Cross, it is an honor," she said. "We have you in seat 1A, and I see a note here from the station manager. We've pre-cleared your luggage, so you don't need to wait, and—" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "On behalf of the new team, welcome back." "Thank you." "Maya," Damien said. He took his boarding pass. He walked through security. There was no Brenda to stop him. The lane was wide open. He boarded the plane. The flight attendants knew he was coming. They greeted him by name, taking his jacket, offering him a hot towel before he even sat down. Damien settled into seat 1A. It was soft, spacious, and rightfully his. He accepted a glass of champagne. He looked out the window as the plane began to push back. The tarmac was a hive of activity. Baggage carts were zipping back and forth. The ground crew, wearing neon yellow vests and ear defenders, were laboring in the sweltering Miami heat. The plane paused on the taxiway, waiting for a clearance. Damien looked down at the cargo loader right below his window. The man was older than the rest of the crew. His hair was silver, matted with sweat. He was struggling with a heavy military duffel bag, heaving it onto the belt loader. He paused for a moment to wipe his forehead with a dirty rag. Looking up at the massive Boeing 777 towering over him, Damien recognized him instantly. It was Frederick Golson, the former captain. The man who had treated the cockpit as his throne was now lifting bags for minimum wage. No pension, no prestige, just the roar of engines he was no longer allowed to control and the heavy baggage of other people's lives. Golson's eyes locked onto the first-class window. He couldn't see Damien through the tinted glass, but he stared at the seat. He knew who sat there. He knew what sat there. He stared for a long moment, a look of profound, exhausted regret etched into his sunburned face. Then, the lead baggage handler yelled at him to hurry up, and Golson bent down, grabbing the next suitcase. Damien watched him until the plane turned onto the runway. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply took a sip of his champagne, the bubbles crisp and cold against his tongue. He opened his laptop. He had work to do. He had an airline to run. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the $500 million lesson. Captain Golson and Brenda thought they were demoting a passenger. They didn't realize they were demoting themselves. They judged a book by its cover. But they forgot that the man in the suit was the one writing the checks. In the end, Damien Cross didn't need to scream. He didn't need to fight. He just needed to let them destroy themselves. It's a powerful reminder. Treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, because you never know who you're talking to or who is about to buy your company. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about karma hitting back. What would you have done if you were Damien? Let me know in the comments below. Stay humble, and I'll see you in the next one.